I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship when I, 34 male, met my wife, 35 female. It hadn't been a traumatic breakup. The two of us were just growing apart and wanted different things out of life, so we decided it was better to break up. A few months after that breakup, I'd bumped into a woman who introduced herself as Katie. We just started talking in a coffee shop and hit it off. When we exchanged numbers, I did warn her that I had just gotten out of a serious relationship, which meant I wasn't ready for anything serious or anything at all. She waited until I was ready, which was pretty amazing for me. I thought that a woman willing to wait for me must have interested me, right? It ended up not being the case, but at the time it truly did seem like I found someone good for me. We took it slow, and within a year and a half, the two of us were moving in together. After another 6 months, I proposed and we were planning a wedding. The wedding went off without a hitch. The two of us were financially stable at the time of our wedding. I had a decent job and so did my wife. While we might not have been as rich as the 1%, the two of us could be considered middle class at the very least. Our relationship was also good. We had our ups and downs, but the two of us truly did seem to be creating a great life together. For the first 3 years, everything seemed great until my wife started working on a particular project at work that was difficult, or this was what I thought of at the time. She was working long hours and just spending a lot of time out of the house. I missed her, but I understood that she was busy at work. When I had an important project at work, she supported me. I kept asking when she would be finished, but my wife kept extending the deadline. This has been going on for nearly 6 months now. It made no sense why she would still be spending all these late nights at work. It got to the point where I couldn't deny that something wasn't right there, so I went on to her laptop that she had brought home from work. Her home laptop didn't have anything. I already checked. This meant the evidence had to be there. I didn't know what evidence I was looking for, but I knew there had to be something on her laptop that would explain to me what was going on. On her laptop, I found several emails from an email account I didn't even know she had. On this email were dozens of emails that were shared between this unknown man. They were all of a romantic or sexual nature, which only confirmed the truth that I was afraid to admit to myself. She was cheating on me. When she came back home from picking up dinner for us, I had the laptop out in the open with the emails right there so she could see that I knew everything. My wife didn't say anything at first. She looked like she was in shock, so I took the chance to ask her who was the guy she was cheating with. My wife screamed, saying I had no right to go into her work laptop because that contained confidential information. I almost wanted to laugh because she had been the one to use her work laptop to talk with this guy, so I asked again. He was a former client of the office that she had continued speaking to even after the contract ended. One thing led to another and they started sleeping together. I asked if she had feelings for him. She said yes. My wife said she was going to eventually tell me that she wanted a divorce so she could move on and be with this man. Once I did a little digging, I discovered this man was very rich. When I say rich, I mean filthy stinking rich. She always loved the finer things in life, but seemed like she wanted to work towards it. I couldn't understand the shift in her personality. Maybe it had always been there, and I was so blinded by my love for her that I just wasn't able to see it. Whatever the reason, I knew this marriage was over. My wife fought it for a bit, but I think she was only doing this because she felt like it was what she had to do. The divorce seemed to take a long time to come to fruition, but in reality, it was just a matter of months. She went one way and I went another. A divorce never was on my radar. Yet here I was newly divorced and alone. My ex-wife already had someone in mind. She posted on social media that she was with a new man, and they were engaged to be married. The truth of it was that her so-called fiancé was already married. He told her he was a widow, but his wife wasn't dead. Rather, she was just in another country taking care of an ailing family member. When she returned, everything hit the fan, so to speak. My ex-wife's engagement was called off, but this was a moot point given that her AP was already married. They couldn't get married anyway. After that, her social media posts seemed to become quite erratic. She was posting about how she had lost her soulmate, but what I think she was upset losing was her wealthy AP. It was all about the money. This guy was going to help her get to that lifestyle much faster. Meanwhile, after my divorce, I reconnected with the girl from the past whom I had originally cut things off with just before meeting Katie. The two of us were friends for a while before we realized that we were finally in a place where we could give this a second try. She knew about my divorce and was sympathetic. When word got back to my ex that I was back with this particular woman, she went ballistic and started blasting me all over social media. She spent so much time blasting me and her AP over all her social media that her job started to become in jeopardy from what I heard. My wife was put on probation at her place of work. They were a public company, so things you could post could be used against them in some way. I just chose to shut down my social media for the time being, because reading her posts was doing nothing but causing stress for me. As far as I know, she has been moved to another department and isn't making as much money as she once was. This is all on my ex. If she had just been happy for what she had, then all of that could have been prevented. My current girlfriend and I are talking about marriage but are trying to take it very slow right now. The last thing I want to do is run into anything without being completely sure. Don't want to make the same mistake twice. OP, it's almost poetic to think that you ended up in a relationship with the girlfriend you were with all those years ago. It's a shame that you had to go through your ex cheating on you followed by a divorce to get back to her. No one should have to go through that. Your ex truly is a piece of work. She's lucky that she didn't lose her job completely for having a relationship with a former client, and using her work computer no less. In my opinion, they should have fired her the second they found out about it. However, again, this is just my opinion. It's almost laughable that her relationship with the AP turned out the way she did. What did she expect from someone willing to sleep with a woman? I imagine most people with any sense aren't going to be surprised he was lying the entire time. Just like your ex was. Good on you for moving on and taking it slow with your new girlfriend. It seems like the two of you have something special. Of course, things could change, but this is the point of taking it slow. To make sure no mistakes are made, as you mentioned at the end of your post. Now for our next story. I, 49 male, met my wife, 49 female, when we were in our mid-20s. We were friends for a while before we decided to date. The two of us dated for around a year, which isn't that long in the grand scheme of things, but at the time it seemed like we had been dating long enough. She mentioned us getting married and I said I wanted to wait a little longer. Within a few months, I finally was ready to propose to my then girlfriend. She accepted and the two of us started planning a wedding. It was around this point I should recognize the red flags, but I didn't. Why? Well, I was in love. See, my fiancé wanted a huge wedding. While I understand it was a special experience, I didn't see the point of spending a couple grand on what was essentially one day. I ended up convincing her to have a small, intimate ceremony. She seemed all right with it at the time, but I think as the months and years went by, she almost started to resent me for talking her into that. The thing is, we couldn't have afforded such a wedding at the time. I suggested that one day we could have the wedding of her dreams one day if we decided to renew her vows. This seemed to please her, but again, I felt like this resentment was always there, just lingering beneath the surface. Was I the most romantic guy in the world? No, but I tried hard to keep the romance alive by doing little things for her over the years, and it wasn't like my wife didn't know this when we got married. We also didn't have kids, so there wasn't that pressure hanging over us. The years passed, and by the time we were in our 40s, we had been married for almost 2 decades. Things had gotten stale for the past year or so, which led me to plan a romantic night out. I even asked my sister for help because, like I said, I wasn't very romantic. It ended up not going anywhere. My wife never came home that night, and when she did, she said that she had stayed at a friend's house. They had been drinking, so she figured it was safer for her to just spend the night there. I saw no reason to not believe her, so I took her at her word. The next night I tried again and we had a pleasant dinner. When I tried to initiate intimacy, she brushed me off, saying she was too tired. Again, I didn't think too much of it. We both worked a lot, which was why we were finally able to afford the lifestyle we were currently living. This trend continued, and it got to the point where I had to ask myself if I was going to continue to believe her stupid lies, which were lies. I reached out to her friends to see if she was there, but they covered for her. I shouldn't have been surprised. The only way I could think was to directly confront her about her lies and ask her if she was cheating. To my surprise, she admitted everything the night I confronted her. I think I was in shock that she just straight up told me that she was cheating. Honestly, I don't know what I was expecting. I think I thought she might try to deny it and tell me that I was wrong, but she didn't do any of that, so I asked who it was and how long it had been going on. He was a family member of one of friends she met one day. It was an instant attraction, and he was so romantic. There it was, the one thing that I could never manage to do. I did try, but my wife didn't think that I was trying hard enough. This guy was everything I wasn't and more, she claimed. Our marriage ended that night, and what began was the divorce process. It wasn't a bitter divorce. We agreed to split everything down the middle. The house would be sold and we each take half. This seemed like the best option for us to get away from each other quickly. Once everything was final, I bought a condo with the money we split from the joint account. I still had a decent amount left over that I was going to keep for a nest egg. Eventually the house sold and I put that money away as well. You never knew when you were going to need it. My ex ended up doing the exact opposite. She took her money and bought an even bigger house than the one we lived in with each other. Then I heard that she was planning a wedding. A very huge wedding, I might add. It was the wedding she had always wanted. I was having flashbacks to the wedding we had all those years ago. My ex had resented me for all these years because we never had the wedding she truly wanted. As embarrassing as it is to admit, I did look at pictures on Facebook afterwards and my God, it was a huge affair. Everything looked so expensive. I can just imagine how much money she spent on the whole thing, including the dress. At that point I knew I had to take a step back and stop obsessing over this woman who was my ex. I focused on spending time with my friends and family, which helped. I assumed my ex was spending time with her AP. Turns out though not everything was great. I learned that a year after they got married they were in debt. My ex spent the divorce settlement on the expensive house and expensive wedding, making it so she had nothing left. Her job did bring in a decent amount of income. My ex was the only one making good money in that household because the AP was a bum. She dared to out to me to see if I could lend her some money. My ex played on our past relationship and the memories we made over 2 decades, but I wasn't buying it. I told her that it wasn't my problem that she spent all of her divorce settlement on pointless crap. I hung up on her and proceeded to receive at least 3 more calls from her that night, along with 3 very nasty voicemails. After I listened to them, I just laughed and played them to my friends to show how far she had fallen. They all found them as funny as I did. My ex truly had no shame, or was just that desperate. I don't know if she ever truly believed that I would give her the money or not. Even if she had reached out to me a few months prior, I still wouldn't have given it to her. At no point was I ever that desperate. I blocked her number that night because I didn't want to hear another word from her. We were done. She cheated and wanted to go be with her AP, who was the new love of her life. If she had planned better, then my ex would have money just like I still did. Most of my family and friends were happy to see her go. I wonder if they had ever liked her or just tried to get along with her for my sake. It didn't matter anymore though, because my ex was a part of my past and that was where she was going to stay. OP, you made the right decision all those years ago not to have an expensive wedding. It's only one day out of your entire life. It's not to say that you can't make it special, but rent a wedding dress. Don't get a hugely expensive venue either. Make it a nice and small intimate affair. The one thing I'll give your ex is that she did own up to it right away. It doesn't change the fact that she never should have cheated on you in the first place, but at least she didn't continue to lie even when the evidence was right there. It's quite ironic that your ex was finally able to plan the wedding of her dreams, but it ended up being what was truly her downfall. She probably realizes now that it was a bad choice to waste all that money not only on a huge house she probably didn't need, but a huge wedding. To think she reached out to you for money means she must have been desperate. Good on you for shutting it down and leaving her to deal with the consequences. She made her bed of debt, and now she is going to have to lie in it with her bum of a husband. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. When you marry your spouse, you have to recite vows such as in sickness and health, for better or worse, and most importantly, till death do you part. I, male 45, took those vows seriously when I married my first wife 15 years ago. The two of us married after dating for about 4 years and living together for 2. It seemed like we were a great fit for one another. Similar goals, interests, values, and everything like that. It was around 3 years in when I started noticing little things. She wasn't distant or anything and still accepted my touch, but she was sneaky. My ex never wanted me to see her phone. Not that I had a reason to at the time, but making it so obvious drew attention to it. This probably ended up being her downfall. The thing that made me realize something was going on was when her phone rang while we were watching a movie one night. She bolted to the bathroom and started talking in hushed voices. I confronted her when she came back because that was just too strange for me not to bring up. Again, more denial that nothing was going on. It was her friend who really needed to talk to her. I remember hearing a male voice before she rushed off to the bathroom, so I confronted her about that fact. It's a guy friend who was her excuse. As far as I knew, my wife didn't have any male friends. I wouldn't have a problem with it, but the fact that she didn't say anything was concerning. So I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed her phone from her when she was texting on it constantly one day. She shouted at me, but I got the evidence I needed. I saw texts back and forth with this guy named John. They were of a romantic and sexual nature, which just confirmed for me that my wife had been cheating on me. I asked how long this had been going on. She said a few months. It wasn't something she was looking for, but it just happened. The thought never crossed my mind that she would ever step outside our marriage. It sounded silly, but I never saw it coming. We seemed happy, and she seemed genuinely happy to me. Yet, here she was telling me she had cheated on me with some guy she met at a coffee shop of all places. He was the barista and started flirting with her. One thing led to another, and a month later they started an affair. Cheating was a deal breaker for me, so I told my wife our marriage was over. She cried and seemed genuinely distraught by the thought that our marriage was going to be over. This lasted for a few days, until I told her I had finally gone to the lawyer to start the divorce process. After I told my wife, she told me that she never loved me anyway, and her new boyfriend would make her happier than I ever would. The sudden change in her attitude was shocking. I knew she was just doing this to hurt me, so I tried to brush it off. In a little under a week, my wife moved out and stayed with her family. I almost wanted to ask why she hadn't moved in with her new boyfriend, but I wanted to make a clean break from her. After the papers were signed, I felt relieved. However, there was also devastation. I hated the fact that my first marriage had ended the way it did. We were supposed to spend the rest of our lives together. At the time, I was close to turning 35 and facing the end of my marriage. My ex seemed so happy once the divorce was final. She'd be posting these pictures on Facebook of her new boyfriend. I had to eventually delete my Facebook because it wasn't a good idea for me to constantly be obsessing over what she was doing. I then started working on myself. Working out, hobbies, friends, and everything I could do to keep my mind off my ex. The divorce was a necessity, but it didn't mean that I wasn't hurt that this ended up being the outcome. It was entirely my ex-wife's fault. All she had to do was stick to her vows. How hard was that? After about a year, I was starting to reach a new level of happiness. I wasn't sure what my ex-wife was up to and didn't care. My sister cared because she took it upon herself to tell me what happened to my wife. They had mutual friends, so it was easy to find out what was going on with my ex. The AP ended up taking her for all she was worth. She paid his bills, gave him money for a business, and the kicker was he had been cheating on her the entire time. I didn't feel any pity for my ex because now she knew how it felt. How she thought a cheater was going to be faithful to her was beyond me. She was in a lot of debt now thanks to giving the AP so much money. During our marriage, we both had good jobs and made decent money. We had long since paid off any debt we had. So it was a shock to learn that she had ended up in such a bad financial spot. This woman my sister was describing to me didn't sound like my ex at all. It sounded like an entirely different woman. She was so desperate that she had even gone around asking others for money, including my sister. I was surprised she didn't reach out to me, but I had her blocked on all my devices. We didn't share any children, so there was no reason for us to remain in contact with one another. Once I met my second wife, all thoughts of my ex flew out of my mind. We met at work actually, and while it's never a good idea to get involved with a coworker, I couldn't help myself. The same applied to her. It was about a year and a half after we met and started dating that I proposed. It was quite fast, but I felt like it was right. When my wedding was announced, my ex did reach out to me to tell me congratulations. I just responded with a smiley emoji because how else can you respond to that? I didn't have any obligation to speak with her, but I still wanted to say something to her, just to get it off my mind and never have to think about it again for as long as I lived. Now I'm 45, and I've been married to my second wife for years. Things couldn't be better between the both of us. The last I heard, my first wife was still alone and hopping from relationship to relationship. The way things are looking for my ex is not good. She is going to end up being alone when she could have had a long-lasting relationship. I guess I should thank her because if she hadn't cheated on me, I never would have met my second wife, who is amazing. OP. It's good to hear that you were able to find happiness with your second wife after the heartache you experienced with your first wife. The last thing you said is especially poignant because she probably did you a favor when you think about it. Still, I hate that you had to hurt to find your way to true happiness. She is now reaping what she sowed by cheating on you all those years ago. People always go about a sudden problem in their marriage the wrong way. Instead of talking to the partner, they seek someone outside the relationship, which makes no sense. It was no surprise to hear that the man she cheated on you with ended up cheating on her. Once a cheater, always a cheater, as the popular saying goes. If she ends up spending the rest of her life alone, then that is on her. You were big enough to respond to her congratulations message, even if it wasn't necessary at all. This story is another example of always pushing forward and never giving up on love. You took a chance even though you were terrified because you felt like it would be good for you. It truly is a good mindset to have after such a traumatic event as a divorce. Now let's get into our second story. My wife and I met on a blind date that was set up by friends. I was a little hesitant to go through with this blind date because I never had much luck with them, but I had been in a bit of a dry spell. It was either go on this date or continue to remain lonely. I got on the date and it ended up being amazing. My wife or girlfriend at the time was very friendly and charming. We had a decent amount in common where making conversation wasn't a struggle. The two of us dated for nearly 2 years. From there, we moved in together and got married in a small wedding ceremony surrounded by family and friends. We had lived together before marriage, which I always insisted on doing. In my mind, it gave people a chance to get to know each other better and see if they were a match before taking that giant step into marriage. Marrying my wife seemed like the best decision at the time. The two of us moved into a better apartment, continued to succeed in our jobs, and even got a pet dog. She was the one who wanted the dog, yet I ended up being the one who took care of it most of the time. Don't get me wrong, I loved the dog and enjoyed taking care of her. I'd always loved animals, but my wife was the one who wanted this specific breed that could be a bit difficult to handle. She promised me up and down that she would care for the dog a little more than half the time. However, I was doing over 90% of the work when it came to our pet. This should have been my first red flag that she was so willing to brush off a responsibility. I just did my best to handle it because I was still madly in love with my wife. When she got a promotion at work, things started to change, but not for the better. I understood she had a lot of responsibilities now because she was supervising 3 people. It just seemed like there was something more to it. Anytime I asked her what was going on, she just said she was super stressed at work, and that she was sorry for treating me this way. It was just a whole lot of stress. I wanted to believe it, so I forced myself to believe it. Ignorance is bliss, as they say, and I remained in ignorance for nearly a year after my wife's change in behavior. One day, I decided to surprise her at work. I had gotten off early, so I thought it would be a nice romantic little thing for us to do. I got to the office and was told that my wife had stepped out to go to lunch. It was my fault for not checking with her, so I went back to my car. When I was about to pull out of the parking spot, I saw my wife entering the office building with a younger man who I think was one of her subordinates. The reason I did a double take is how she was acting with him. She was very touchy, giggly, and not acting like a supervisor would with someone they were supervising. I watched them go inside the building, but as much as I tried to brush it off, I couldn't because I kept picturing how happy she looked. My wife never looked at me like that anymore. It pained me to say this, but it was the truth. I wanted to ask her what was going on, except I doubted she would tell me the truth. So I decided to check her phone when she was in the shower. The phone is always the place where you'll find what you need. Her texts were full of evidence of an affair with her subordinate. I sent copies of all the texts to myself in a surge of impulsivity. I wanted a chance to be able to use them. Once she got out of the shower, I told her I knew of the affair and to not BS me about everything because I knew the truth. She seemed shocked that I would take the step of going into her phone and violating her trust, which was ridiculous. She was the one to cheat on me in the first place. She looked like she wanted to hit me, but just stormed off back into the bathroom. I was glad that we only had another month left on this lease because our marriage was over. For a few days after that, I was in shock about the end of my marriage, and once the shock wore off, the grief set in. My wife had left to go stay with her parents. They were supporting her, but this was no surprise. To them, she was their little girl who could do no wrong. I had finally sought out a lawyer and planned to move into another unit in the complex that was smaller than the one I shared with my wife. She seemed to be facing no consequences. Her family and friends were on her side with her job still going well. It was then I had enough and decided to make the affair known to my wife's workplace. I had evidence to back it up, so it wasn't like I couldn't prove it. The fallout was quick. My wife was forced to resign, and the subordinate was moved to another department. When I learned she left her job, she reached out to me and lashed out, saying how she knew this was my fault. I didn't deny it and told her I took screenshots of her text messages that day, and was sitting on them for weeks now. She screamed and cried, saying she was going to have her father hire a lawyer to go after me, but it was all bluster. My soon-to-be ex was the one who had done wrong by having a relationship with someone below her. It went against the rules set forth by her place of work. It was a relief when the divorce was final and we were no longer legally married. I spent a lot of this situation in a state of shock and then devastation. Most of the time I was wavering between the two. The divorce being final was a chance for me to be able to heal, which I desperately needed. For a while my ex-wife did try to harass me, but eventually it stopped. I don't know why she did that, and frankly I didn't care. It meant that my ex was now finally out of my hair. It was the best part of it. The last I heard about my ex is that she had gotten another job, but it's much lower paying than her other one. It had been hard for her to find one because of how suddenly she left her other job. This was completely of her own doing, so she had no one to blame but herself. I still don't know where it all went wrong or why she cheated in the first place. The best I can figure is she's just a terrible person who enjoyed the rush of cheating on me with someone at work. His being younger probably was a boost to her ego too. My ex certainly would have gone far in that job too. I've since received another promotion with another on the horizon. I also got the dog in the divorce because I was the one to take care of her anyway. There was no way she was going to take her. Honestly, I can say I don't care what happens to my ex or where she ends up in 5 years. I'm on the path to happiness, and she seems to be on a path to permanent misery. Do I hope that she looks back and regrets what she did? Sort of, but I hope one day I won't care about that either. It was such a boss move to take screenshots of her text messages and then send them to the higher-ups at your wife's job. She should have thought about the consequences before she started sleeping with a subordinate. Anyone will tell you that's a bad idea. And if it does get found out, it can result in the loss of a job. Just keep that woman on the back burner of your mind. She isn't worth any more of your thoughts, tears, or energy. It's a shame her family backed their daughter and refused to force her to take responsibility for her actions. But this just proves the whole family is trash. Continue to focus on your job, dog, and whatever else makes you happy. This will help you truly be able to move on from her once and for all. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Hey folks, welcome back to my channel Relationship Haven. In today's story, Opie found out his wife cheated on him after he had suspicion she was having an affair, then decided to put a GPS tracker in her car. After doing so, he then discovered that his wife was at a motel with her affair partner, so he paid her a nice surprise visit and served her with divorce papers while she was there. Now she's a wreck. Let's get into today's story. I have been married 7 years to my wife. We have no kids. 2 years ago though, she started a new career and has been very successful. At the time she started, she mentioned a man that she works with but said on more than one occasion that he was a jerk, and she didn't like to work with him. Since then she has softened a bit and really doesn't mention him much. I felt like I had no major reason for concern. I've always trusted my wife, and although our marriage is not perfect, I felt like we got along pretty well. Fast forward to about a month ago, I started noticing some changes in behavior. She was texting a lot more and never letting her phone leave her side. She seemed to have more things going on at night and on the weekends. She became cold towards me and wouldn't reciprocate any affection. She also lied to me several times about strange things. The last lie was when she was packing for a business trip and I noticed she had purchased a new, much more revealing bathing suit than anything I'd ever seen her wear. I asked her about it and she said she ordered it online. Not true. And once she tried it on, decided it wasn't appropriate for a business trip to Florida with her colleagues. She then left for the trip and took the bathing suit with her. While she was gone, I decided to do a little digging. I had never in our entire relationship ever gone through my wife's things, but I had had enough of all the lies. In one of her work bags I found a drawing someone had done of her, almost like a caricature, but it was done on paper from a hotel. I also found a post-it note with driving directions to her male coworker's house written in her handwriting. I went through our bank statements and found that many times when she was supposedly at work, she was out to different restaurants around the city. This was enough for me to investigate further. I'm a private investigator by trade, and ethically, I have no problem invading someone's privacy when confronted with reasonable suspicion of wrongdoing. I placed a GPS tracker in her car, legal in my state since the title is in my name. The Sunday after she got back from her trip, she told me she was going to work at a coffee shop and run some errands. Her car never came within 1 mile of a Chipotle, but when she got home, she walked in holding a Chipotle cup and confirmed she had eaten there. Then on the following Tuesday, she told me she had to go to a company dinner and would be working late until dinner. The GPS showed her leaving work at 3:20 in the afternoon and driving to the restaurant where her car remained until 9 o'clock that night. The final straw came on the next Saturday. We were supposed to watch my niece play tennis at 8 in the morning. She said she wanted to drive separately, so she could leave the venue and go to work at a coffee shop. After the match, she told me she was heading to X coffee shop and added a few details about why she wanted to go to that coffee shop. I said, "Have a good day," and went to my vehicle. Well, on the GPS, I watched as she drove directly to a Comfort Inn motel. I got to the Comfort Inn and waited in an adjacent parking lot until I could confirm that she was actually in the building and not sitting in her car. I called her from the lobby and asked how is X coffee shop. She said it was good. Why? The only other thing I said was, "Come down here so we can get this over with." Once she came down, she said these exact words. "It's not what you think. He has to do this because he's been caught with other girls before." I asked what she was talking about and she said that he always works in hotel rooms. She said that they didn't do anything physical, and that's when I told her to get out of my car. I drove away and she called 50 times. I finally answered and I told her if she tells me even one more lie, I'm hanging up. She said that they did kiss once about 5 months prior, but that it was a mistake and didn't mean anything. She said again that they were just working. I asked how many times had she met him in hotels, and she said about 10 over the last 9 months. I then asked what she did on that Tuesday and she became defensive. She said she was at work all day until her work dinner. I called her a liar and hung up the phone. She showed up at our house where I was loading up my car with my belongings and my dog. She stood in the driveway refusing to move until I talked to her. She was in hysterics, crying and apologizing. I moved out that day and have been gone for a month. We have met a few times for her to try to explain things. However, when it becomes my turn to ask questions, she becomes very upset, gets defensive and says things like answering these questions isn't good for the relationship. She's also lied about several of the details, even when the details seem completely inconsequential. I've called her on the lies and she accuses me of trapping her by asking questions I already know the answers to. Through all of this, she has remained constant that this was not a romantic relationship. She said that she became really good friends with this man, and that he was helping her with her career. She admitted that their conversations would become inappropriate when they would talk about our marital issues. She's admitted to texting him and deleting the texts saying that they weren't romantic but could be seen as flirting. She said that she has been depressed for a really long time, and he was good at talking her out of those feelings and encouraging her in her work. I know I'm being deceived here, but there's a part of me that believes her. It may be that I want to believe her because I love her, or I'm afraid of the truth. I'm really hung up on finding out the truth, but the reality is I don't see any way that I can get over the facts that I do know, so why does it matter? Am I losing my mind? Update. We are a month out from Discovery Day. I spoke with her last night and here are the highlights. I asked if she has talked to the man over the last 4 weeks. She said that he doesn't know that I showed up at the hotel on Discovery Day and called her out. She also said she hasn't talked to him about the situation because this is an issue in our marriage and doesn't involve him. I asked if she has stopped all non-work related communication with him. She said that she is tapering down. Tapering down? I lost it. She said she feels like she has to taper down rather than no contact because he doesn't know that I busted her. Infuriating. She then lied about a completely insignificant detail. I called her on it and I was 100% confident that she was lying. She denied it to the point of yelling and never relented. I left it and chalked it up as one more unresolved issue in this saga. After she told me she was tapering off social communication with the other man, I hid a voice recorder in my house and left. Last night I reviewed the tape and discovered my wife and this other man had spent well over an hour on the phone with each other over the course of at least 2 phone calls. My recorder died in the afternoon. I would assume they talked again in the evening if not more. I didn't hear too many specifics from the phone call, but I did hear a few alarming things. They talked for a while about the current state of affairs in our marriage, something she claimed he knew nothing about. They talked about how to use the secret phone app on their phones, so they could not be detected. She called me a jerk for showing up late for breakfast that morning and they talked and laughed about a million other topics. I haven't heard my wife that giddy since we were dating. I confronted her about all of this and she admitted to some of it but denied other parts of it. I don't really care anymore. Here's another update. For the past 2 weeks I have gone no contact with my wife. A few days ago she texted me and asked if we could talk. I told her unless she was willing to confess to everything that I was not willing to talk. She then said she knows I've wiretapped her phone and that I already know everything. I told her I needed to hear it from her directly. She finally agreed to sit down and tell me everything. She came to my house and confessed that her relationship with the other man was indeed sexual, and that it had been going on for the past 6 months. She admitted that she purchased a hotel room one day before our anniversary to be with him. She also confirmed that she had continued talking to him after being caught, and he was helping her deal with my questions. She claims that she has now broken it off with the other man for good, and wants to work on our marriage. This confession came 6 agonizing weeks after I caught her in the hotel. I believe the only reason she confessed is due to my persistence. However, she said that she was always planning to tell me, but wanted to make sure it wouldn't hurt either one of us too badly. The damage done during those 6 weeks is unsurmountable. And one final update. First, let me say this: if you're in this situation and you're even remotely having thoughts of taking your life, don't do it. I say don't do it because if you do, you're going to miss out on the greatest time of your life. I mean that 100% sincerely. I know it's impossible to see when you're first going down this road, but trust me, don't miss out on this life. Now the update. We got divorced. I took my time in making that decision. I wish I wouldn't have taken that time, but who cares? She wanted to stay together. For what reason I have no clue. She lied and gaslighted me for an eternity, and that torpedoed any reconciliation possibility for me. It's the hardest thing I've ever gone through. During my marriage I was all in. I wasn't perfect, but I loved my wife with all my heart, and wanted to be with her forever. I would have done anything to make her happy, and I think I did on several occasions. Now that I'm away from that relationship, I can see it for what it was. A narcissist crushing every ounce of energy out of a good person. That marriage was completely one-sided, with one person giving everything and the other person taking even more than could be given. By the end of the marriage, I truly thought I was worthless as a partner. She degraded my profession, my personality, and my looks. Since getting divorced, my business has flourished, and I've been able to date women that I would have thought were way out of my league. I seriously thought I was ugly, in part because of the way my ex-wife made me feel, but now I'm having gorgeous women much younger than me approach me in bars. I've been in a couple of wonderful relationships with great women. They ended amicably for general compatibility issues, but it illuminated how terrible of a partner my ex-wife really was. I don't have any contact with the ex anymore. Really don't even think about her very often. This divorce became contentious because she thought I was getting too much of the money, even though I was taking less than 50%, because I wanted it to go smoothly without breaking up businesses and retirements. Can you imagine that? Cheating on someone and then getting upset about the amount of money they're taking even though it's less than 50%. That hammered home for me that I was making the right decision, and I needed to get away from this garbage as fast as possible. I lost friends in the divorce, good riddance. Most took my side, but I don't care about those that didn't. They made it easy for me to jettison them. I lost my in-law family. This is one of the hardest parts. I really loved some of them, but I get it. I sent enough correspondence to the affair partner's wife that I'm 100% confident she knows. She never contacted me back, and I'll respect her decision. Some advice if you're fresh in this nightmare. Separate yourself from the situation. This is the only way you're going to be able to think clearly without being gaslit. Get professional help. I was in therapy for a long time. It helps. I'm so much stronger now because of it. Surround yourself with friends and family as much as possible. Make healthy choices. Go to the gym. Limit drugs and alcohol. Get outside and try to sleep. Take people's advice but make your own decisions. It's your life. There were some really dark days after Discovery Day, but after the initial heartache, it has been the best time of my life. I'm truly happy every day. If you're going through this and need some advice from a self-proclaimed expert, hit me up. I'm happy to help. A huge thanks to everyone here who helped me when I was struggling. Cheers. Wow, OP. I'm glad to hear how much better you're doing now. In one of your other updates, you were mentioning how you were considering staying with her. I'm glad you immediately came to your senses and realized that you needed to get this train wreck out of your life as soon as possible. Your story serves as a perfect example that life can get better after going through a situation like this. It'll take some time, but once things do start to improve for you in life, you will be able to move on. You mentioned that your wife barely even crosses your mind anymore, which shows you have truly moved on. As far as the friends that you lost along the way, they were never your friends in the first place. True friends will stick by you, especially in times like what you went through. I wish you the best, OP, and hope your life continues to blossom with excellence. Thanks for taking your time to listen to today's story. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already done so, and comment below on what your thoughts are on today's story. If there's a story you'd like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.